So, making a video about more Nintendo Switch 2 topics and rumors and leaks was not the plan for today's conversation. However, something pretty interesting and very enticing came up that I wanted to talk about because this could be one of the first and most substantial pieces of evidence to a Switch 2 we've seen yet. So basically, it is being reported by a Chinese media outlet that there is a parts supplier, a company that is a parts supplier, who has worked with Nintendo in the past, including parts for the Nintendo Switch, that is now working on and planning to release something early next year in 2024. And there's a lot of reasons why people are pointing to a new Switch model or a new Nintendo console, something next generation, Switch 2, whatever, as the possible product that this stuff might actually be for. This is actually really convenient and kind of funny timing too, because my last video, which was about Nintendo Switch 2 air quote leaks and all these fake images and these fake video computer generated things that people are trying to sell as real leaks about the Switch 2. In that last video, I discussed that stuff and why there's a whole bunch of it out there and there's going to be more of it and why I just don't like it, right? People trying to purposefully peddle stuff that they know isn't real. But along comes this piece of news, which, like I mentioned at the beginning here, actually feels substantial and something that we could potentially get excited about. Of course, it's not a confirmation of anything, but it's exciting enough, and the conversation happening around it makes it feel like something that maybe we could start to get excited about, although there are some elements that I do struggle to believe, such as the release timing for the Switch 2 that seems to be hinted at through this piece of news. I don't know if it makes sense to me, and it kind of contradicts some of what Nintendo has said, but at the same time, they have lied in the past before, so what are you going to do? So the company in question is a company called Pixart, and like I mentioned here, they are a company that has provided some hardware components for the Nintendo Switch in the past, which means the fact that we're talking about them releasing something and making statements about something coming out early next year gets a lot of us excited about whether or not this could be for a new Nintendo device. Not long ago, an article published by Money DJ talked about Foxconn's business, with the item stating that Nintendo was planning on releasing its Switch successor in the first quarter of 2024. Now a new financial report from the same source has been discussing another one of Nintendo's frequent business partners, Pixart Imaging. The intriguing part for Switch 2 observers is machine translated as this. Quote, however, it is worth noting that the supply chain pointed out that the Japanese game machine will be launched in early next year, which has been absent for many years. The game machine is also one of the key customers of Pixart. So of course I'll have that article and the sources linked below so you guys can follow up a little bit more with what's going on and what's being said there, but that's the general gist. What we're basically looking at is the company Pixart that has made components for the Nintendo Switch in the past is reporting that they're working on stuff that will be released in some console in the first quarter of 2024. And they say it's from a Japanese business company and it's hardware that has been absent for many years, kind of paraphrasing that quote there. And so there's a lot of ways to look at this, and I think that a lot of folks are looking at this as potentially a hint at the Nintendo Switch 2, because you could say that there hasn't been an actual brand new piece of hardware from Nintendo, a Japanese company, in many years. They introduced the Switch in 2017, and then yes, they've iterated on it with the Switch Lite and the Switch OLED models, but those are still 2017 hardware Switch devices. Even if you improve the screen on the OLED, it's not changing it from the 2017 architecture that built the original model. And so the last new device from Nintendo was 2017 with the Switch. That's what this is being interpreted as, and I do think it's a good point considering that Pixart does have this history. They've made parts that went into the Joy-Cons, a lot of evidence pointing to them maybe making the sensors that's in the bottom of what I think is the right Joy-Con with the little IR camera down there. And then other stuff, I think, for the GPU or the chipset or what have you that goes into the Nintendo Switch. Please look into it. I very much always remind you guys, I don't know the technical components, so I get very confused with that stuff. But there's a lot of stuff out there, including what I've linked below, that points to the sensors in the Joy-Cons and other stuff that has to do with the chip inside of the Switch. So Pixart has this hardware-related history with Nintendo, specifically with the Switch, something coming out in Q1 2024, seems to potentially be a Switch 2. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, even as the guy who's been talking about the Switch 2 the longest on YouTube, I am only 50-50 in terms of actually believing if this news, if it's even true, has to do specifically with the Switch 2. However, 50% is still pretty strong, okay? So, yes, I'm split, and I think it's way too early and mysterious for me to give a hard commitment to one side or the other, but there is enough of me that says this does line up, and it does make sense that this company that's made components for Nintendo consoles and the Joy-Con controllers in the past, talking about a Japanese company, which Nintendo is, new hardware that's been absent for years, which technically the Switch is, 2017 release. Yes, it does certainly make sense that maybe they're hinting at the Switch 2, because I also believe a reveal for the Switch 2 is sometime in the next 6 months, and I do think that the Switch 2 is more than likely going to release in 2024. So all of it adds up to me, enough for me to 50% believe that this could be real. The one thing that I do question about this, though, beyond the fact that we could be just confusing it as a different Japanese company, Nintendo's not the only Japanese company, so we can't forget that. So beyond the fact that a lot of us might be just misinterpreting who the company is, the only other element that to me kind of is evidence against this being the Switch 2 is that they say Q1 of 2024. It was only a couple of months ago that Nintendo basically said that they won't release a new piece of hardware before spring of 2024, right? So that both gave us a lot and not a lot in terms of trying to decipher when we might expect the earliest release of a Nintendo Switch 2. So spring starts like in the middle of March, or maybe near the end of March, right? So it's tricky because Nintendo's fiscal year ends March 31st, and you could say like March 19th or March 20th or whatever technically would be the first day of spring, and Nintendo said they won't release new hardware before spring, so most people said, okay, that means it's going to be a holiday release, because Q1 is wiped out. I don't necessarily think that's true. I don't know that I think Q1 is when we would actually see it, simply because of that statement, even though, yes, it's possible Nintendo might be lying. But here's the thing, the bulk of spring is Q2. So it is still the first half of 2024, and I've long said that I think the first half of 2024 is more likely to me than the holiday of 2024. I could be wrong. Okay, maybe it's going to be holiday, but I've always kind of felt a first half kind of release window. Then they said it wouldn't be before spring, and so it's like, okay, well, January, February, and March seem to be wiped out, except for the very last week of March, so maybe Nintendo squeezes it in at that point, which could aid in what this whole kind of situation is talking about. But for me, I don't necessarily think Nintendo was lying about that. I think that they were being honest, and you could call me foolish for believing a company like Nintendo in this situation, but I don't know. It just rang true to me when they made that vague offhand comment about you won't see a new Switch or a new Nintendo device before spring of 2024. I kind of took them at their word at that. And so even though there's like a week of March of Q1 that is in play based on that statement and that lines up with this, I don't really necessarily believe that we'll see it at the end of March. I'm like, maybe 15 or 20% of me thinks that it could be possible, but the vast majority of me thinks it's probably going to be after Q1, and this whole timing of this whole statement about Pixart and everything says Q1. So it could just be a lot of wires being crossed and misinterpretation of the same information. And if we take it at its most simplest form and we don't worry about the granular details, maybe it's just saying in the beginning, in the first half of 2024, a new device from a Japanese company is coming out. Pixart is making some of the components. Great chance it's a new Nintendo console. To me, in my opinion, as just a fan and a lifelong gamer who was guessing and speculating for fun, that all lines up to me. There is half of me that says either none of this is true or we're just guessing the wrong company, okay? Because we have to remember, it just says a Japanese company and it's easy for us to fill in the gaps in our brains and say it's Nintendo, which it could be, but it also could not be. There are other Japanese companies. So, I mean, hell, with the PlayStation 5 Pro rumors floating around out there, Sony's a Japanese company. What if it's just a PlayStation 5 Pro? I mean, it's been by next year, I should say, it'll be over 3 years since the PlayStation 5 released, so you could argue that a piece of hardware that's been absent for many years That could be 3 years, and maybe it's talking about a PS5 Pro. I mean, I guess that's an option on the table. Or it could be something else that we're not thinking about, some PC components, another one of these, handheld devices kind of in the form of the Nintendo Switch that's releasing, because we've got Steam Decks and ROG Allies and all these things that I don't know anything about, but they're out there. And so maybe it's something like that. It could be a lot of things that isn't Nintendo. So the 50% of me says it's either not real or it's not Nintendo as a Japanese company. But I'm going to go back to the 50% of me that says it makes sense, it lines up with the timing, it feeds into things that I've been thinking about for a couple of years anyway, and while it's not concrete evidence, it feels like tangible proof of something, and yes, it does feel like it could be Switch 2 stuff. And so, does that mean that the reveal is going to come before the end of 2023? I mean, I've thought it for a couple of years now, and I still think it. I think I'll probably give up on believing a 2023 reveal if we reach the end of October and we haven't seen the reveal, okay? But between now and the end of October, I'm going to still believe that there's a great chance Nintendo reveals it before the year is over. And if there's any truth to Q1 or first half 2024 release, then I think that's basically guarantees a 2023 reveal of this console. So, man, it's been very fun as somebody who's been talking about and predicting this for a few years to see the 2023 Switch 2 conversation grow and take shape. Because I believed it a couple of years ago, no one believed me, and now we have a lot of people rallying around the concept of it happening this year. Again, doesn't mean it's going to be correct, doesn't mean it's going to be happening, but it does feel pretty tangible, and this whole discussion about Pixart certainly adds a lot to it, so it'll be fun to see what happens. That's what I think about this whole rumor, and that's about it.